I started shaping 1963, 64. I started surfing and shaping almost the same time. What made me get into shaping was a friend of mine that owned a surf shop. He invited me down. He said, why don't I shape my own board? I go, no, I don't do that. He had a bunch of blanks that he bought really cheap, so it's no problem. I told him, I'll tell you what, I'm gonna get off in the next 2 days, then I'll come down. So that was started me. Now, when I first did that board, it took me 12 hours. But when I finished it, to me it was like, wow. Now, coming from the guy that owned the surf shop, he was a glasser and he shaped boards too. And he told me, you sure you never shaped boards before? So again, I'm watching surfing and the boards had to be tweaked. The board had to go where it's gotta go. I've got a Hawaiian name and I'm proud of it, and I wanted to get it into the surfing world. That's where I want it.
This past Friday, January 15th, Ben Aipa passed away due to complications from a stroke and Alzheimer's disease. He was 78 years old. Big Ben's exit coincided with a seismic swell event on Oahu's North Shore, the venue of much of Ben's influence. As if heaven's embrace of Ben created a vacuum backdraft of energy that rained unimaginably large and perfect swell, the likes of which only the world's heaviest, most prepared surfers would be able to harness. Jerry Lopez once said about Ben Aipa, when you see Ben coming, don't think, just get out of the way. And that's precisely what mortals did on January 16th on the North Shore. CT surfer Connor Coffin even posted the forecast on his Instagram stories and commented that he'd be enjoying the action from his sofa.
I got a shot of me somebody took when I must have been about 240 pounds coming to a contest over here, state contest, carrying 2 boards under my arm, you know. My hair was long, I had a beard, a mustache, and it looked mean. So I kind of used it, okay? I kind of used it where I don't have to say anything. They just look at me in the lineup and I can get waves as long as I don't blow that wave. Being a very athletic person, you know, and the aggression came in, of course, when I'm positioning and, you know, paddling for the wave and, you know, making the statement on the maneuver, you know, not yelling people off the wave, not yelling people paddling out, just making a statement on my performance on the wave. So I kind of like was doing it for, hey, there's a lot of big guys out there. Come on, go surf. You know, that kind of thing, you know. I'm a linebacker, okay? The wave come in, the wave is an offense. I'm gonna take it down because eventually the wave will take me down.
This Aipa swell exceeded everyone's expectations. Most of the North Shore's most famous reefs were nullified. The swell was too big for Pipe, too big for Sunset. Waimea was closing out. The outer reefs, normally dormant, were not only breaking, but they were firing. 30-foot waves were barreling and peeling down the reef flawlessly for hundreds of yards. The very few qualified and capable surfers who ventured out had the once-in-a-lifetime chance to actually surf their 9 and 10-foot surfboards. Not just make a drop and bottom turn like usual big wave surfing, but steer those boards down, through, and around mountains of water. Mark Healy said, quote, "I've never gone faster on a surfboard in my life. I saw some of the best waves I've ever seen that day," end quote. And Ben Aipa was somewhere in this. He's pulsing through all of it. Sure, maybe spiritually, like the various Andy swells that happen to show up each year on his birthday, or the Scion swell, but I also mean that literally. Ben coached a lot of these surfers, and he gave them the foundational tools that they needed on this day. He invented and shared surfboard design elements that were shaped into every one of the surfboards ridden this day, January 16th. Important figures are often remembered and written about with a chronicling of contributions and influence, but true icons, people like Ben Aipa, their influence is impossible to track. It's baked into so much of Hawaii's surf culture, and thereby surf culture at large. His influence is impossible to tease apart, and it's also impossible to imagine what surfing would look like if Ben had never existed. In January 2020, I was able to spend an afternoon with Ben's son, Akila, to hear his perspective on his father, his influence, and here's what Akila had to say.
I got to see him become everything from being, my dad had, I guess me, not early, but a little later, so in his eyes, and I feel like sort of this time vault or time capsule for surfing, because I got to see the evolution of boards going from 11 to 10 to 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 5s, so when they started chasing it hard, to watch that happen right in front of my eyeballs in our home, and see the evolution of board design, it was just so neat. And then to see not just the surfing part of it, but on the back end of it part where people didn't see was my dad as a mentor to these kids, trying to consume their time by taking them skateboarding too, so one thing about Hawaii is not different from many other places, that kids grow up really fast here on the street, and whether you're Waikiki or West Side, or I don't care what side you're on, so there's a lot of outside influences that steer kids wrong like other places. So I think my dad tried to provide a platform for the kids to keep them with a direction rather than watch them go in three directions, and I know that was part of the reason in the case. So to have those guys in our home and our lifestyle, and then to skateboard with them, and to watch my dad go through kind of a mentorship, and then it evolved into coaching, and then board design, board evolution, is pretty cool to see that as a kid. And then watching my dad coach and then judge all the Triple Crowns out here, from the inception of professional surfing. I basically grew up in the stands at all the Triple Crowns, in the judges stand back when I could freely go up and hang out with the spotter. I could hang out with the head judge. I would look over his shoulder because it was an open stand and my dad was judging, so I was free to roam up there, So it was really fun to be in that environment before it was so sterile, kind of like it is now.
For sure.
So
yeah. I had no idea about the skateboarding detail. Your dad skated too?
My dad skated some, but he even shaped the boards and made the boards out of wood. They were mini surfboards.
I didn't know that.
And so my favorite photo of my whole life, and I've lost it in 4 or 5 moves now, but was a black and white photo at Hawaii Kai Elementary of Buttons on my left, Mark Liddell on my right. We're all Papa Wheelie grinding the back of your skateboard with the 2 front wheels up and the back wheels on the ground, but all 3 of us are on handmade wooden boards with my dad's logo glass on the bottom, so with the boards hand shaped by him. I'm not sure in what class or what, because I used to go to schools and do seminars, shaping, board building, and I'm not sure where the wooden skateboards came from. Where I don't remember seeing my dad make those at the time, but I just remember riding them. And then the Wallows part where Animal Chin and all these skaters had such a big influence from guys like Buttons and all those guys skateboarding Wallows, and to grow up there and remembering the grass tube and watching these guys drop in and skateboarding, and basically they were surfing the pavement because they're that surf psyched and stoked, and when the waves sucked, that was their other outlet. So I think my dad tried to just keep it positive for these kids, because a lot of them got sucked into other things real quick, growing up fast.
For sure. Were those skateboards sold commercially at all? I mean, I don't remember even seeing them.
Ever.
They're just for friends, basically.
Yeah, and I wish they were, because, he didn't put the stings on them, he didn't put the wings on them. I don't think, he didn't have that kind of time, but pretty cool that we were that passionate about skateboarding. And then some of my youngest memories of going to California is my dad dragging me to skate parks, looking up the hill, looking at these snake runs, and just seeing guys going whoosh, 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 all the way down the hill. And it was the coolest thing ever, because like I said, the surf wasn't always good in California, so you look up and they had the stairs on the side, and guys would be just doing laps, after laps. And then unfortunately, I think that was the early 70s as a Grom, and then I think mid 70s is when, you guys are vagrants, those are terrible places for kids to be, yada yada, and they started breaking them all down, unfortunately. But when I was young, I was pretty sure they were everywhere, and you knew how to find all those little drains that had all the runs, all the places that had the snake run parks. It was the thing to do before skate parks, I think.
Yeah,
almost
backyard pools that were emptied out and
that
stuff.
too.
Yeah.
But no, they're these runs. I don't know what parks they're called or what runs they were, but they're amazing. Like I said, as a kid, you look up, on this little hill, and guys are just like basically surfing the hill down, and that snake run thing. It's pretty dope to see.
What did your dad expect of you? I mean, considering that he's kind of fostering a lot of youth and guiding them, how did he treat you as a kid? Was he your coach surfing?
He was
Did
my
he
coach.
expect you to become a board shaper?
I don't know what he expected of me because he never laid that on me.
Okay.
I was lucky enough to just dip in and out and be what I wanted to be and be supported for it. My competitive nature and drive was up to me and what I wanted to be, but with him as a coach, there's a dynamic there. So I'm learning to coach now, and I saw how he had to separate it, and me and my dad had to practice how to separate it. So he was my coach at the beach, but once we got home, he was my father, and it was nice to have that balance, because in these environments now you see kids with fathers that don't know how to shut it off. So even at home, they're coaches. So my dad was a professional coach, but at home he was my father, and so I was lucky, and he was lucky that we had that balance, so we wouldn't have to butt heads. I don't want to come and talk surfing with my dad. My dad made surfboards and coached. He didn't want to come and talk surfing with the family. My little brother and mom and family didn't want to hear that crap. It's family time.
Good.
So we had a surf time and a work time, and then we had family time, and like I said, I think that was a nice balance for us to have as a father-son coach. So
I'm glad to hear that. I wonder about that. You see somebody like Gabriel Medina, whose dad is on the beach, or Felipe Toledo too, and there's no separation. Whereas like Kaloe, at some point realized Pops is going to be Pops, and I'm going to hire Snips to do the coaching.
Well, it's funny you say that. Okay, so there's a crazy dynamic there, because in their professional career, pretty sure Snips and Dino weren't the best of buds.
Right.
So for Dino to let that down, to accept Snips as a professional and know that Snips is the best professional for his son, says a lot. So a lot of dads can't let go, and I got to give some dads respects, because the dads get you there to a certain point. But has the dad surfed any CT events? Has he traveled and done the tour? Does he understand all those dynamics that comes with being a professional? Dino does, and he's willing to step away, even if that's seen a lot. So if you're a regular dad and you see a dad that's done it all and he's still willing to step away and give it to someone, all that does is save his relationship with his son, probably. Totally. He can be a dad. He can wear one hat. Totally. All these dads, like I said, they're trying to be Superman and wear 10 hats. It's deteriorating on them and their relationship with their sons or their daughters, from what I see. And it's easy to see that when you're afar. When you're dad, you're in it. You think, oh, no, I'm good. And then you, from afar, you see how toxic it is. You see them letting out on the kid. You see the poor kid not stoked.
Exactly.
You see the kid hanging their head. You see the kid get in the car. Dad and kid don't talk. You're like, you see that way too common, way too often. Like, that's not what it should be. So I think it's about accountability. I'm coaching now, and the parents ask me how I do it. It's not about me. It's about the kids. What do you want out of this, and what are you willing to put into it? Once you accept that, it's so much easier to deal with. That was on our responsibility when my dad coached us, and whether it was Gerlach, Sonny, whoever he was coaching, there's no babying this along. You're treated as a professional, and you either come to the table as a professional, or please don't come and waste anyone's time. So, I think a lot of the problem with being a parent is sometimes you bring that comfort blanket along, and then you don't know when to cross that line of discipline. This is work, because then it becomes this one big blur of, oh, we're here, it's fun. Like, if it's fun, great. Or are you looking to get a result out of it? Is this your job, or is this training to be your job? Right. It should be an internship.
Yeah.
Basically, to get to the real show.
Right.
So back to like Gabby and his dad and Felipe's dad on tour. I don't know. Personally, I look at that as weakness. However anyone else wants to see it. You got your dad jumping in the shorebreak screaming like a monkey. That cracks me up. That just tells me, what? Like, this is a grown man's tour. If you can't come to the table on what you're not confident enough with your tooling and your skills, is someone with pom-poms really going to do anything for you? Like I said, as a coach, I coach the students surf. I can't go out there and yell at you and yell you and will you into shit. This is a self-motivating sport. If you don't got it, don't fucking come. Pretty simple.
Yeah. And yet he has 2 world titles.
And more respect to him, he's a damn good competitor. He's a beast.
Yeah.
So I don't think Daddy's really doing anything for him, but maybe he is. He's keeping him in the moment. He's doing things that we might not see, and more respect to him. And there's maybe something there that's working, or it wouldn't be there. And that's not for me to say. That's for their camp to say. And it's obviously working because he has.
And even if it's working now, I'm more concerned about what the long term, like, can you preserve the father-son relationship behind the scenes? It's great that you're winning world titles professionally.
So
but
for us,
but does that compromise?
It doesn't matter to us
personal?
because it's an opinion. That's only for them to say.
Exactly.
Because
yeah.
behind closed doors, if they love each other and they got a great working relationship and they know when to shut it on off, more power to them.
Yeah.
Who cares what they look like on TV?
Yeah.
Dad can be a jumping monkey all he wants. They're still winning world titles. If that's working for them, that's their formula.
Yep.
Fine.
Yep.
I mean, but I don't know. I don't think I would want to operate like that. I look at the guys I look at that inspire me, like Phil Jackson and
Jordan
Popovich, you know, like as far as coaching, like they're the last guys jumping up and down. They don't need pom-poms to inspire you to do your job. They have words of wisdom and formulas, and if you can't adhere to that, don't waste their time or your time.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so I mean, like I said, I think they're pretty professional about what they're trying to do, and to me, I think they get all the hard work done in the practice sessions behind the scenes.
Yeah, that's
so like
interesting.
I said, they don't need to pop their head off in the heat of the moment. If they're your generals and they're calm in the heat of the moment, I think everybody falls behind that. Personally, I like that kind of, you know, in the heat of moment. I like when guys can think clearly and sharply and make really good decisions. And to me, that's the signs of a pretty solid coach, like, you know, like Belichick and all these guys that live in that moment, that come out on top for the most part. Most times, you know, they're making the best decisions in the craziest of times because they're thinking clearly, and that's pretty respectable.
What's your Pops up to now?
Pops is pretty chill right now. Pops has had a very rough couple years health-wise. He contracted sepsis in the hospital and almost went, you know, we almost lost him. So he's gone through some pretty radical times here in the last 2 years. And
is he on Oahu?
He's in the Big Island. He's slowly recovering. He's retired. He lives there with his wife and real quiet. And yeah, it's been tough for us, you know. So it's pretty gnarly watching your alpha family, everything go from that to struggling to not, you know. I'm lucky that he's alive, and we're just lucky that my son has a grandpa, you know. Okay. So you know, life is precious. If we all
Ben started surfing late in life. In his early 20s, after an ankle injury ended his semi-pro football career, and he began shaping surfboards simultaneously, mainly making single fins and replicating the popular designs of the day. That was until he met a 13-year-old muscly, rambunctious regular footer.
The motivation for me was this kid, Larry Bertleman. You know, at the time, he was just a kid, you know, 13 years old, cut out of school, and he's surfing. He was surfing on things that he found. But in his surfing, he was completely different from what was in front of us. He was ahead of us.
Here's what Ben told me about Larry in 2014. We recorded this conversation in a public place, so my apologies for the ambient noise.
I'm shaping. There's a hole in the wall, okay? And in the afternoon, the sun going down, I get, you know, a little light, right? One afternoon, I was shaping, you know, of course, the light could tell me, okay, you know, I don't even look at my watch, you know, okay, time for going and all that. All of a sudden, I looked, and the light wasn't there. Okay, that looked good. I saw an eyeball.
No way.
Barry was looking, and he just lived around that area where the shop was. So I saw that, okay, and I never say anything. The next day, I saw it again. So I just walked out of the shop, went behind, and I go, hey, what you looking for? That's how I met the kid.
That's unbelievable.
That's how I met the kid. At the time, he came in when I was just developing the swallowtail.
Okay. And had you seen swallowtails before, or did you develop that on your own? Or?
For me picking it up, I think in the past somebody did dovetail. Okay. Which is the quickest turning bird?
Swallow?
Yeah. So I made the cut, you know, figure out how to shape it without breaking it, without,
Sure.
and, first one I did, I broke the tail off,
Yeah.
but it's only foam,
Yeah.
So I got it down, looked at it, then I talked with the glasser guys, how long it take to be lapped and stuff like that, and that's how it started.
Wow.
So-
interesting. So it came from the bird, aerodynamics of a bird.
Yeah.
Interesting. I never heard that before.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, it makes perfect sense, of course, because the name, but it just never dawned on me.
Well, you're looking at guys on the boards, they try to emulate, birds.
Yeah. Was it at that time? Was it just like a 8-foot single fin with a swallowtail on it, or had you started?
Well, I was really short already because of Larry.
Yeah.
When Larry was doing his thing, of course, there's a couple other local guys, local kids, saw this. So I watched these kids, and they look different. I mean, they were going low to the bar like Larry, stuff like that. Because when I first was working with Larry, okay, he was trying to go 100 miles an hour in one space.
Yeah.
Okay? So I worked with him on bringing it down, and the kid kind of understood, what I was talking about. So he got into it. He developed a form that was far ahead, so far, man.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at this go, just by him being low and how he is actually not pivoting the board, but carving the board on a tight spot, That's what a swallowtail came in.
Okay.
I did it, Then, of course, the other guys, of course, I got them off what they had, and this is writing what Larry was writing.
Okay. So he was kind of the guy dictating the changes.
Yeah.
Ben Aipa's swallowtail has been utilized in a wide range of board designs ever since Aipa introduced it on the South Shore in the early 70s. But it was originally used in part to create Aipa's most iconic model, the Sting. The year I recorded this conversation, 2014, was his 50th anniversary of shaping. And to commemorate it, the Boardroom Show selected him as their Icons of Foam honoree. Scott Bass procured an original Sting, hand-shaped by Ben in 1976. The board was shaped for Button's Kuluyo Kalani, and it's the exact board, in fact, that he's paddling out at V-Land in that iconic portrait of him looking back over his left shoulder at photographer Jeff Devine and throwing a peace sign. For the Icons of Foam shaping competition, world-class shapers were tasked with replicating that Buttons board in a 90-minute format, and then Ben and his son Duke would judge which most closely mirrored his original hand shape. The shapers were Roger Hinds of Roger Hinds Surfboards, Matt Calvani of Bing Surfboards, and Davey Smith of Channel Islands. I interviewed each of them to hear their thoughts on Ben and his influence in their work. And of course, we'll hear from Ben himself in today's episode. So first up is Davey Smith. Davey was a professional surfer and, believe it or not, a pioneer of the floater in the late 70s and then the aerial in the late 80s. And in the 90s, he transitioned into the shaping bay and took a position with his longtime sponsor, Channel Islands, where he maintained a vital role for the next 30 years.
Okay, Ben had just come out with a Stinger, and the whole thing was happening with Buttons and Larry Bertelman and Mark Lydell. Who else? I know I'm forgetting names, but on the South Shore. And it was so cool because it was groundbreaking in the sense of that they were pushing the limits like you wouldn't believe. Mm-hmm. And it was the whole thing of it was really cool because you had these young guys, these young kids just surfing the South Shore, just like enjoying life, before the pressures of like work and all that. And Ben was there to shape them the Stinger, or Sting, like he likes to say. So it captured everybody's attention, because it was like why we started surfing in the first place. It wasn't about competition, jerseys and all that. It was just like hanging out with your friends and having a great time. So
you explain that as if it was different than what the current mood was.
Right.
What was the current mood at the time?
The current mood, as far as I could remember, it was single fins. People were riding single fins, but they were longer, with the pulled in tail. And so they were great, but you just couldn't wrap them in the pocket of the wave. So you're always like, charging out and drawing long lines, and that was cool. But with the Sting, you could put the fin all the way up, and with the Sting, you could wrap that around in the pocket, and they were doing 360s and stuff, and it was just like way beyond what was happening. So
Where did you have? Did you see that firsthand? Were you in Hawaii at all, or?
well, being with Channel Islands, like Aipa had such a big impact that everybody in California started doing the Stings.
Okay.
So the first couple trips that I did to Hawaii, I actually took Stings. So it was pretty cool.
What was Channel Islands calling them?
Everybody was just calling them the Stinger.
Oh, really?
Yeah, yeah.
Even though they weren't Aipas technically.
Right, yeah, everybody was doing Stingers.
Awesome.
I mean, it was similar to the thruster. Simon Anderson did the thruster, and then everybody started doing the thruster.
Right.
So it very, very similar to that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you ever meet Aipa early on in those days, or?
I met Ben one time at the beach at Rocky Point, I believe it was. It was very vague recollection. But because I had a CI Sting, and he's like checking it out. He's like, "Whoa, hey, bro, where'd you get that?" So it was very cool.
Cool. What are your memories of Ben himself? Like, what kind of a presence did he have for that era and on the North Shore and stuff?
Well, that was another thing. It wasn't really the North Shore. It was the South Shore.
Okay.
Yeah, and you had just, he was always like a father figure.
Yeah.
And to a whole group of guys, and just a solid guy.
Yeah.
And I think that resonated with a lot of people, and especially that group that was just surfing the South Shore, surfing these perfect waves, clear water, and doing these crazy maneuvers. And Ben just happened to be there to facilitate that whole thing.
Yeah.
So it was very cool.
How important is it for you? You're coming from a professional surfing background. Ben obviously can surf. How important is it to have that skill set of being a good surfer while you're a shaper? How much does it affect your ability to shape?
I think it affects your ability a lot, because you're implementing your knowledge as a surfer into your shapes. So obviously, when someone orders a board, they don't have all those nuances,
Right.
but you have the years of experience to put in the shape to make it, they may not ask for that, but you put it in there. They can't see it, but you put in the things that make the board excel. So
Yeah.
I think it's hugely important.
Yeah. Because there's guys who don't really surf who are still successful shapers, and I always wonder that, like, they just rely on feedback basically from surfers, and they seem to be able to do it successfully, but I've always wondered how they make that adjustment.
Yeah. I think that's a really great point. I think that you can not be like a great surfer and be a great shaper.
Yeah, it seems
and
to.
I think sometimes, because if you're not that great of a surfer, you're not going to interject your opinions to when someone's ordering a board.
Okay.
You're not going to go, "Oh, don't do it like this, do it like this."
Interesting.
So I think God, I know so many great shapers that aren't that great at surfing. So
Yeah, that's interesting. That's a good way to
So
put
I
it.
think it's kind of it can work both ways. For sure.
Yeah. It seems to be able to.
Yeah.
What was your experience like shaping in there right now for that hour and a half?
It's amazing. I mean, that generation, what craftsmen, God, they can use a planer like nothing else. It's like, it puts all of us to shame. It really does. Those guys are gnarly. It's just mowing foam, doing like 5 boards like that a day.
So much work.
It's crazy. So I think that it's important, stuff like this, to make sure, like, myself and the younger generation all develop that craft, in design, even with the new technology. I think it's really
Always
important.
have reverence for the planer.
Right.
Yeah.
dance, we know the moves.
So then came, of course, Buttons, Mark Liddell, and the powerhouse, Dave Kilo.
Yeah.
You know, and the other guy was Michael Holt.
Right. So how did those boards differ? Because like Dane and Michael obviously are surfing the North Shore.
Rocker volume.
Okay.
You know, how much entry rocker, you know, because at the time the rockers were low.
Right.
And we had the beak, you know.
Yeah.
We had the beak.
How does the beak affect the performance of the board?
Oh, at the time it was just a look.
It was just the...
So everybody put the bump. Okay. But when everyone was doing that, instead of all the bump like that, I was taking the bump. I was foiling it.
Okay.
Because these guys were foiling, surfing. So I foiling that beak. So it complemented what the board looked like.
Uh-huh.
It really did.
The whole aesthetic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know.
Wild winters, warm coffee.
Buttons, Mark Liddell, Dane Kilo. Their surfing again was so far ahead, the boards had to catch up with them. That's why they came in with the sting. Because these guys are riding their fins forward, they were surfing forward, and the boards in the back third wasn't reacting. So just by chance, I went down to K Lagoon. The fastest boat on water at the time, the hydrofoil boats. As they came into the turn, they dropped the throttle, but the momentum of the weight of the boat kept going. And the cut on the side of the boat made the boat pivot without losing speed. I saw that, and that's why I brought the sting in. There's a cover shot of Buttons and Mark at Kaiser's on the wall. They both had stings, and their boards had blue flame and green flame. Their design caught fire with those guys on the Flame Boys.
Get up, get down, get up. Sentiments seem to their feet change.
And what that board did was it really made the board go rail to rail easier because of the wing. The wing made the tail much narrower, so you have this big front half for your speed and your glide and your drive. But then when you really wanted to crank a turn, you could push on it as hard as you want because the tail pulls in. But yet it acts like a fish kind of in the front, so, or you know, gives you that surface area. So, and it was a single fin, and the stuff that, you know, Buttons did on that board obviously is legendary. I think what it did is it went from being like a big wave focus on Hawaii, like with Brewer and Parrish, and he basically brought things to the South Shore and brought performance surfing, more pre-contest surfing with Buttons and Larry Bertelman and those kind of guys. So he pushed performance small wave surfing with that board primarily.
And this is a familiar voice. This is 2013 Icons of Foam champ and former Surf Splendor guest, owner and head shaper of Bing Surfboards, Matt Calvani. He began his career in 1985 with Hap Jacobs in the South Bay of Los Angeles, then worked with Dennis Jarvis at Spider, then Phil Becker at Becker Surfboards. In the year 2000, he partnered with Bing Copeland to transition into an ownership position with that legendary label, relocating the factory to Encinitas, California, where he still operates today.
I think when I originally saw Stinger was maybe back in the 80s, probably, you know, early 80s, and at the time, like I think I was airbrushing. I airbrushed a couple boards because back in '85, that's when I started, and I was like really like, wow, this is a really extreme design, and didn't really understand it. But then, you know, got to know like kind of the background a little bit more with Ben, and then, you know, Buttons and all that influence, you know, and the guys that rode those boards. And then really more exposure I got with that board when I worked with Phil Becker, because he pretty much shaped all the way from, you know, 63 to like, you know, up until he retired, and he was, you know, he shaped everything, and he shaped probably 500 or 600 of those. And when I was shaping there at Becker for like 7 years, he had shaped probably, you know, 20 or 30 of them for guys that just wanted, you know, an original sort of Stinger from the 70s, you know. So, and I ended up shaping a couple back then, And you know, it's sort of like you put your own take on the board, and you know, generally most of them had full rails back then, big rails, and that was the kind of thing. It was just like a 70s board with kind of a twist.
Did you have any experiences back in those days with Ben himself? Did you ever spend any time in Hawaii? Or?
No, I never really. I had met him maybe like 5 or 6 years ago through Bing. He's friends with Bing Copeland. I knew people that worked with him. I knew his his diligence of craftsmanship, and he's very picky and very meticulous, and he only works with certain people. And I had a guy that I had worked with for many years, and he did some contract glassing for him when Ben came over, and he was going to get the license, and Ben was always like, I don't really want to do this, and he never really gave the license to the guy because he couldn't let go, because he was just such a stickler for quality. And not that the guy wasn't good, it's just that Ben is like a perfectionist, and it's hard to get somebody else to think that way.
Yeah.
And the guy that would have got the license was an amazing shaper and glasser. So
interesting.
71, 72 was still a single fin Sting. Okay. 73, 74, even before that, the multi-fin systems was coming in already. Now, I ventured into putting fin boxes, where that, during the time, was a no-no. No, they want to put boxes drag. Here, I want to put boxes, I can play with my fins, stagger them, things like that. So eventually, it caught on. It caught on, but it took a while again. Again, during the time, because of the width and the thickness of the boards I was riding, in order to get the kind of turns that these guys was getting, smaller guys, I had to do with something. I had to do something. The third fin came in right after that. Okay, when I needed more direction. In order to get more direction on the twin, it's going to be bigger. But then you're defeating the purpose of the idea of a looser board. So you put a keel. Right, it wasn't a fin. I guess it was a fin at the time. Okay, I got this 1/4-inch ply. I cut a shape like this, like a keel. I sanded it down, foiled it, got glued it on the back tail of the board, and used it right out here. Okay, the plywood keel fin wasn't glass, because I was just trying something out. If it doesn't work, throw it away. I never did.
Our final Icons of Foam interview is with Roger Hinds. His 4-decade history of board building spans from the North Shore of Oahu at Country Surfboards and Lightning Bolt to California's Bear Surfboards, Hobie, Harbor, and his eponymous Roger Hinds surfboard label. He's a wealth of knowledge, experience, lots of stories, and he's also the shaper that took the win at the 2014 shaping competition tribute to Ben Aipa.
At 59 years old, I've been able to come to a place that I love riding. I was just in Japan recently shaping, and I took a board I had made, much like what I had stripped down and made in the late 60s. It was a transition board. It was actually a template off of a board from 68, but I put a good rocker to it and some good rails and a single fin. And I rode it in Japan. I rode it here and in Japan. One thing I really love about a single fin is it forces you to smooth your style out.
Right.
And when you're forcing yourself to smooth your style out, for me anyway, it just seems that it really comes together when I'm riding a thruster or what have you.
It does, for sure.
If you're not really gyrating, and for me anyway, that's what I try to achieve. I've been surfing since the mid 60s, started building boards in the late 60s, stripping them down and reshaping them into transition style boards.
Okay.
Glassing them alongside the house. Yeah, back then there were no glass shops that would accommodate somebody. There's really no blanks available either.
Right.
Clark didn't sell them direct.
So you had to strip down the boards.
I think there was a place, Rogers Foam in Santa Ana, I remember I think you could go there and get some blanks.
Okay.
But for the most part, they were sold at surf shops, and that seemed to be the easiest. They were available. There were a lot of boards available. It was the end of Vietnam, and people were still over there, leaving their boards behind, and easy to come by.
So that was Orange County, obviously, is where you were growing up?
Yeah. And then I went to Hawaii in the early 70s. It's kind of like a light went on when I got there to really saw how it happened. I was in country surfboards watching some guys glassing boards, and it was pretty life-changing at that point.
Was it?
Really to see, wow, this is how it's done? That's interesting.
Yeah.
But, and then I got together with Kent Smith, who at that time was Pismo Beach Surfboards. He went to Hawaii. He was working for Charlie Galanto, actually working for Ben Aipa.
Okay.
Working with him, and he taught me a lot. Back then, we were splitting the time between construction and surfboards because there was not full time in either of them.
Right.
It was Hawaii, and nobody really wanted to work a whole bunch. We were there to surf.
Sure. So did you live in Hawaii during that time, or
Oh, yeah.
how long were you there?
Spent almost I was there most all the 70s.
Okay.
Back and forth from California to there.
Nice.
Whenever there was a lot of work, I would work, and when there wasn't, I'd build surfboards.
Can you tell me about kind of your exposure to Ben Aipa and kind of his influence and how he relates to, I don't know, your career?
Well, Ben, I didn't know him personally. I'd met him a couple times, but he was bigger than life in the water. It's just a huge presence. We were surfing Sunset a bunch at that time, and he, just a gentleman. Quite the opposite of what you would picture a guy of his stature.
Yeah.
He was very kind and great craftsman. I remember my friend Randy Rarick was telling me that when Ben started working at Surfline, that's when they really started doing a lot of the Sting boards, and they were the guys at that time. It was kind of like little satellite groups on the North Shore in the early 70s. In the early 70s, you were either a Lightning Bolt or Brewer, and then the Sting guys came in, Buttons and Mark Liddell, and that just kind of changed everything, how they were surfing.
Yeah.
And then Dane. It kind of really started to change things really quick.
In what way? What way did it kind of influence A, your surfing, and B, your board building?
Well, they were surfing inside the tube, which was not really done at that time. They were turning inside the tube.
Gotcha.
They weren't just straight line of running. They were surfing inside the tube, and they were just all over the place. Pretty fantastic to watch and be part of that action. And Ben has such a history that goes back so much further than me with surfboards, Makaha, and all of it. I mean, the guy's just so well-rounded in all of his shaping abilities, and now Duke's at it, and I know his other son Akila.
Yeah.
They just keep that heritage going. That's pretty fantastic.
Well, it's interesting in surfing specifically how these guys who are super iconic that have this history that seems so, like, almost it feels old, but it really isn't, and they're still around and they're still accessible and still working.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of other things where you still have access to the masters.
Yeah, and there was a lot of shapers that came through the 60s and 70s and 80s and 90s and 2000s, and they made the transition every era of that, and still stayed at the top of the pack with their style of boards they're making. And make no mistake, the Sting board that they're making today is the same board that they were riding in the 70s. They've really ramped it up, and so they've been able to bring that design and just take it and improve on it.
Do you have any experience riding the Sting?
Yeah, early on I rode a couple of them, and I've shaped quite a few of them in the 70s for guys. And but I don't go into this today with any I'm not taking anybody lightly. I think everybody brings something to the table on this that, and I guess Ben's got some surprises, which should be interesting. And it's not going to be an easy task. I think just being part of this, you're a winner already. Just to be part of it, just to be part of Ben's action and to be part of the U.S. Blanks and the whole deal here. Scott Bass, I don't know, you're pretty fortunate.
I think my major goal in my label, my brand, my name, it's Hawaiian, for one thing. In the industry, less than a handful of actually Hawaiian surnames in this thing. And also the inspiration from Duka Hanamoku. I learned a lot from Duka Hanamoku in my swimming days. Okay, in my swimming days, okay, we all knew he was an Olympic champion and all that. He'd come down to the swim meets. As for him surfing, to me, never clicked to me. Okay, when I graduated, okay, I got more involved in other sports. Then I got into surfing 3 years after I graduated, and by this, then this company was honoring Duka Hanamoku, a contest for Duka Hanamoku. And I just got into surfing like about only 2 years. So myself and another surfer from Hawaii, guys was asking, how come you guys are not in it, the Duka Hanamoku Invitational? Because we weren't well known outside of Hawaii. When we were there watching the contest, Duke came to us and go, you guys are going to be in this contest next year. So Duke got us in. All I want to do is I want to share, but like Duka Hanamoku did, what he shared. He is my, what's the word for it, man? My inspiration. In fact, my first son, I wanted to call him Duke, but my first wife had another name, okay? My second marriage, first son, Duke. I got a Duke in the family.
What was the last board that you rode?
The last board I rode, last boards that I ride. Okay, I got a quiver, and depending on the tide, and they're all 5-inch setup.
Oh, okay.
But I quad it a lot. Okay, 6'4", 7'4", 8'4", 9'4", 10'4". Same board design.
Okay.
If it's a sting, they're all the same. Almost all the same dimensions. Okay, and all my boards average 24 wide, and they average 4 1/4.
Wow.
Hey man, I'm 73 now.
That's awesome.
And I'm gonna suffer.
Yeah, no kidding.
So when I paddle out, at least guy can see me paddling out instead of trying to paddle out.
Yeah.
But by doing this, can I hold my own form?
Yeah.
Not my style, but my form.
Yeah.
Am I gonna waste the wave?
Right.
So this accumulation of what happened in the last 51 years.
Yeah, exactly.
Of using the body. Then to get myself off the hook, okay, inside my mind, compare with the other sports. What's the longevity of age in other sports? How
10 years?
How far can a tennis player go?
Not
Okay,
far.
golfing, they can go until they feel the effect, from being constantly on the, on the course.
Yeah.
They'll feel something. It's going to affect their performance.
Yeah.
Basketball, football. There's a limit. There's a limit. I'm lucky.
Oh yeah.
I'm lucky, man. I'm in my early 70s and I can still do it until this thing hit me. Do stretching, yoga, it ain't gonna leave. It's already developed. And not just from surfing. The planer, the blank,
That's probably does it more than
picking
surfing.
up the planer. How many years, how many decades, okay? How many decades you're leaning with a blank, screening, all that. How many decades picking them up? I find ways, okay, I ain't gonna pick them up down here. I'm gonna set up a thing, over here. Putting it back,
Yeah.
all that. So all the years, that I've been doing this, the body said, "Hey, that's it.
Take it easy.
Oh, take it easy."
Special thanks to Fiberglass Hawaii for a series of profile videos that they did with Ben and whose audio I pulled some of the clips for this episode. You can find those videos along with photos and video of Ben shaping and surfing on surfsplendorpodcast.com. I've also got images of all of those icons of foam shapers and their shaping at that event. And then, of course, rapping with Ben and Duke, judging each of their entries. All of that's available on surfsplendorpodcast.com. And then Ben Aipa's two sons, Akila and Duke, are both shaping surfboards and accessible at AkilaAipaSurfboards.com and AipaSurf.com, respectively. Of course, condolences to that entire Aipa family. And then also bravo to those who braved that Aipa swell on Saturday. We covered a lot of those waves ridden on this week's episode of Spit with Scott Bass, which you can find in your podcast feed. And then we will also be discussing it on The Grit with Chaz Smith, where we welcome special guest Chuck Patterson. That'll be available on Friday of this week on The Grit. So I hope that you enjoy that. I hope that you are well. I'll be back here next week with Britt Merrick, continuing this conversation about fathers and family legacy. So until then, this is David Scales for Surf Splendor, reminding you, of course, to get back into the ocean, share some waves, and shred on.